Hey, this is Michael Lindsay from Vinyl MX. We're out here at Glen Helen Raceway today to test out the 2025 Yamaha YZ450F. This is the third year for this generation Yamaha 450, and per typical with Yamaha, we get around that third, fourth year, you get a little bit of a mid-generation refresh, a couple updates to the bike. They're focusing on just the overall handling and stability character of this bike. That comes down to a change in the linkage ratio, rear shock rate spring change, a change in that valving. Also an update to the fork to match, along with new engine mounts and a host of other small changes throughout the bike. The base mapping's a little bit different, throttle housing, switch. They've got some things going on with the clutch to increase durability, but the majority of the focus here is just calming down the bike. This seems to be a general consensus amongst the OEMs right now. It seems like everybody's kind of tapered the direction of, let's see how knife edge we can get our bikes to turn, how agile can we get them. And some people's bikes have gone a little too busy. Yamaha seems to fall into this category where their focus is to make their bikes a little bit calmer and a little bit more predictable. So the biggest change on this bike is definitely the rear linkage. Again, this ratio is quite a bit different. It is a lot less leverage ratio. So they have dropped their rear spring from a 5.8 to a 5.6, and they've also changed the overall curve of that linkage. So they are starting with less leverage, so it doesn't settle through the stroke quite as fast, but it almost has more of a tail hook at the end, so it doesn't go through the stroke quite as quickly. And then the fork has changed where they've dropped the pressure spring rate a bit to help it kind of go through stroke a little more, but they've also preloaded the pressure spring and changed a few other things about the pressure spring to help hold up. They've changed their valve design, the shims that sit on it, and a couple other things to change the flow characteristic. So what does this all mean on track? Well, we actually got to test the 25 against the 24 to kind of help the blurred lines of what they were going for. But again, very simply, the bike feels calmer. Yamahas are comfortable, of course. The old bike is plenty comfortable in places, but sometimes it feels a little busy in the terms of being a little teeter-tottery. The fork was so soft on the old bike, it would kind of sink through a little bit under heavy braking. Acceleration, it would settle a little too quick. Of course, this bike has a lot of power. So the Yamaha was always kind of teetering a little bit. And we've mentioned years past, that's probably the biggest thing we always do, is try to calm that bike down. This one just naturally has a calmer, more held up character front to rear. It doesn't seem to dip as much to the front or the rear. The fork is a little bit more held up initially, but the fork is more linear. It doesn't go through as easy, but then doesn't spike as quick. It just kind of has a more consistent character throughout. And then the rear shock is pretty similar. It actually feels a little bit more held up initially because of the less leverage, but it doesn't go through the stroke as fast. So again, the bike, instead of teetering in and out of the corners, just moves a little bit more in unison. My personal changes today was the bike for Glen Helen conditions being really chattery. We're in the middle of summer, it's just baked in square edge. I mostly was focusing on slower rebound front and rear because it was almost a little bit too reactive this morning. So I slowed it down to just make the bike feel a little bit calmer and get the most out of their changes. The front engine mounts have also changed. It used to be two 4mm mounts side by side. Now it's one 8mm mount, and the shape has changed a little bit. This makes the bike, produce a little bit more of a settled feel in the front. It does have a little bit more connected character, maybe a little bit less bump absorption feel, but overall, again, falls that category, making their bike calmer. Power-wise, the base map has changed a bit, but it is still a lot. The power on this just builds so much. When I ride in the base map, I feel like I'm at half to 3/4 throttle a lot. I never really want to open it up because even at half or 3/4, the bike kind of pulls away from you. I'm using a term I heard Ryan Marais say a couple years back was like runaway character. Like the bike, you set it at constant throttle, but the bike kind of keeps pulling. I'm not the biggest fan of that. So a lot of their smooth options they have, I was running a smooth linear map with traction control. I also ran a version of it with off. Those maps to me are a lot calmer where you hold the throttle, half throttle, 3/4 wide open, and it kind of hits a point and the bike just pulls, and if you're not wide open, it doesn't continue to accelerate. That makes sense. It makes the bike a bit more manageable, and that also helps with the calmness of the chassis. So again, I'm a huge fan of Yamaha's app. It just has so much variance what you can do with this engine. It is a beast out of the box if you want it that way, but it is really fun for me just to calm it down and be able to get the most out of the bike. Another little change this year, well, a couple things that are for durability. The clutch hub or the inner hub has changed. They basically drilled more holes to get better oil flow. They've got different rubbers in there. I'm not a clutch abuser, so not a big deal for me, but for you guys out there are clutch abusers, a little bit more durability there. And then you have the map kill switch on this bike, which has been kind of a problem. I personally, on a test bike, have had one I pressure washed, got a little bit of moisture in it, and it would cut out. I have a couple friends that have had it happen within a couple hours owning the bike, but then I know people that have had 100 hours on the bike and never had a problem with it. It is kind of a hit or miss situation, it seems like, with this motorcycle. They still have gone through and updated that kill switch, the way it's shaped, the way it's got the edging around the button so you don't accidentally bump it, but it's also supposed to be better weathered seal so it's more durable when you're washing the motorcycle. One other minor change on the bike that proves to me that OEMs do listen to reviews and everybody's comments is the foot peg brackets on this bike. Me personally, I never noticed this because I'm pretty bow-legged, so by the time you get to my knees connect to the bike, by the time you get to my feet, they're pretty wide on the pegs. But the foot peg brackets were quite a bit taller than the pegs, and people that could hold their toes in really tight or had legs shaped like that would complain they felt like they were standing on the foot peg bracket. And I've heard that from different test riders, different consumers, but some people I know have never noticed on the bike. They went through and they reshaped their foot peg brackets, shaved them down, lined them up, and redesigned them. So if you do stand tight in with your feet, you're not gonna feel that as much. It has a much more even platform with the pegs. So all in all, what is my wrapped up opinion on this bike? Again, the 25 YZ450F is calmer than the 24. It is more predictable, it feels more planted, it's a bit more stable, and it's not as reactive. Now, things that might slightly do worse, again, because they've calmed it down so much, bikes that are usually a little bit more sensitive, both power and suspension-wise, that teeter more. Sometimes they're a little more playful. Through bumps, you feel like you can hop them through a little more, but also the bikes after a couple laps are usually a little bit harder on the body and they're a little bit harder to control. This bike at times almost feels a tick heavier in a sense, but in a good way. Again, it's just very calm, very predictable, very easy to ride, and it's really appreciated. Again, late summer here at Glen Helen. I'm born and raised in SoCal. I'm not a Glen Helen guy. I suck here. And the bike's just very mellow, very calm to ride, which was really appreciated once we got past about the 11, 12 o'clock point and the track was just going away. Overall, I really can't say there's anything about the old bike that I appreciate more than this one. If you're a Yamaha guy, you've heard what we've said about that bike for the last 2 years, this is better than that. Plain and simple. If you want to know more about what the base characteristics of these bikes were, like I said, I'm talking more about the change for 25. You can go back and watch our 24 and mostly our 23 review when this bike first got changed. That'll give you more information on the total changes of the bike back then. But again, that's just what we have for 2025. If you have any questions, throw it in the comments section below. And as always, thanks for watching.